do you want to give the people a spiel about just you and your background and what you do now?
Yeah. So, hi, my name's Susanna Margison. Thank you so much for having me. I am a lawyer and a coach. And actually, I have sort of invented this modality for myself that I call strategic counsel. I'm not saying I own that term, that's just how I think of it, where I use legal strategic thinking and I mix it with coaching to help people resolve conflict before it gets to litigation, before it ruins relationships. I come up with very elegant solutions to various forms of conflict, whether that's conflict with yourself, conflict with one other person, or one to many. And as entrepreneurs, we're magnets for this kind of thing. So a big subset of my clients is actually entrepreneurs, and we can talk about anything from business to personal because all of that conflict, it all melds together and it forms part of who you are.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, well, when I first met you, I was telling Soren, I was like the very first call was because we were on the group call with Kate and you were like, "I'm basically just like a real life Olivia Pope." And I was like, "I need that."
But the thing is that's okay, so I don't do anything shady, like, I'm not sleeping with the
With the
president of the United
president.
States, like, I'm not a mistress, I don't cover up murders, but there are times when clients will come to me, so but it pays to be in my Rolodex, it pays to have me on retainer. There are times when clients have come to me with really significant issues, like, for example, I had a client come to me, they were gonna fire somebody, and they were really concerned about violence, and
Oh.
I have a guy that I can call. And the next thing I knew, I was in a room with some very, very accomplished people. And my job was just to kind of quarterback the whole thing and make it smoother and see if I could help my client's experience of it. But with one phone call, within like an hour, I had a team that I made one phone call, then they assembled a team, but still that was part of it. And we had a 2 week period as we were like gearing up for it, where it was really tense. I've had another situation where somebody who wasn't my client at the time but became my client hit a pedestrian with their car,
Oh.
and I happened to be at the right place at the right time. I'm very good in those scenarios because that's what I started my law career doing, was representing people who had been sued civilly like that. And like, my client didn't lose a wink of sleep, and thankfully the pedestrian was more or less okay. The insurance companies are dealing with their claims, but my client went from thinking he was going to lose his house to being like, everything's going to be fine. I've got Susanna. She's with me. She's helping me deal with the insurance company. She's helping me through all of this. So there are times when my life does actually feel like a scandal, but like scandal light, like scandal PG rated.
You're like not in DC dealing with all of those people.
No, and, like, if you called me and you were like, "I've just murdered somebody," like, I don't wanna hear that because that's
Like,
no.
don't tell me that.
Yeah, I will not help you clean up a murder, I will help you rehab your reputation, though.
So if you look
No,
bad for
and
killing someone, you'll
well,
help
and I
fix
mean,
that.
okay, I should also say, if you've committed murder and you're like, "I need you to rehab my reputation," a big part of that's gonna be like, "Have you served your time?" Because I'm not, like, gonna clean up that mess. When I'm talking about, like, reputation rehab, I mean, let's say a business screws something up. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
Amazing. Okay, so
of
let's say
course.
a business has a fuck up, right? Like, let's say a business makes a mistake and
Mhm.
they have like a cyber issue where they can't get to the online course for like a week and there's a service disruption. You need to be careful about how you manage that, because that is theoretically a contract violation unless you have something in your contract that protects you from that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
also, people are going to be kind of pissed and they're going to judge you by how you respond to that kind of thing. So I help clean up those kinds of messes. I really love this work. I will help women clean up their reputations after they've been labeled as like being too sexual, or like I've had women who've like been in relationships and then the narrative gets totally screwed up, and then next thing you know, they are on the outs with everybody. They feel alone, and sometimes I am the only person in their corner. Those
Mhm.
are so rewarding because it doesn't take long to put things back where they need to be. And that's just like, that's why I got into law. I wanted to be there when people's integrity was threatened, and I wanted to be the person that was with them through it and helping them through it. And that's what my business has become. And I was thinking about it, and I love the strategic components of managing a
Mhm.
conflict. I've been to court before. I make a joke. I love Lewis Hamilton, but unlike Lewis Hamilton, 7 was a magic number for me. I had done 7 jury or done 7 trials and won them all. I can't remember if they were all jury or not. It doesn't really matter. I'd won them all and I was like, I'm done. I'm undefeated. And and I think if any lawyer does trials long enough, they will win some and lose some. That's just how it goes, how it should go.
Mhm.
So I am undefeated, but I quit doing that because I wanted to help people in a way that I found really meaningful, and I wanted to help them do things like select the right lawyer, help them manage every single facet of a problem and the cleanup.
Yeah. That well, and you're very good at it. I
Thank
I
you.
always tell people, I'm like, Susanna's the reason that I sleep well at night and I can tell people to take a flying leap in my business because
Yeah.
of you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'd be pressed at all times.
Oh, so glad that you sleep well. Yeah, and I mean, and you have me like we have like I'm on retainer, right?
Yep.
Like you've got me if you need me, and that I think that's really important, and that's the point of what I do. That's the point of what I now am calling strategic counsel. Is you've got somebody in your back pocket who can be there, who can offer a new way to look at things, who can help you make an informed decision that's right for you. Because one thing I think with any piece of advice, whether it's medical or legal, you still need to make a choice about whether that's the right advice for you. Because ultimately, I'm not the one rolling around in your body every single day. I have found this. I used to tell clients this. I was like, when I first started practicing, I would I would operate under the illusion that I could control everything, and I couldn't. And what I noticed was that with every single case I ran, there was always a surprise that I didn't like. And
Yeah.
I finally smartened up and I was like, client, please expect a surprise. Like, this is how things should go. That doesn't mean this is how they're going to go.
Yep.
And I think it's important to be nimble to that and be wise to that and also be able to connect the dots for yourself and say, this is the advice I'm getting from my lawyer. What's the advice I'm getting from my banker or my accountant? Or what's the advice I'm getting from my operations manager? And how does it all fit together? And that's what people need. They need somebody who can be like, my lawyer is telling me to go balls to the wall and litigate. I'm worried it's going to blow up every single one of my relationships. So how do I make this all work?
Mhm.
That's where strategic counsel comes in.
That's where you come in. Well,
Yeah.
and I want this episode to basically be a place that people can go when that like something crazy crappy happens to them in their
Hmm.
business because everyone and their mom is like make $10,000 a month. Here's this lead gen strategy. Here's this, here's that. And what they don't tell you is like for every 10 clients that you have, you're probably going to have one that you have an issue with. And it doesn't matter how great you are, how good results you produce, how ironclad your contract is, you're going to have issues.
Yeah.
And you're operating in a highly you and I have talked about this too, like a highly unregulated online
Yeah.
space
Yeah.
where it's the literal wild west, people can do or say anything and there's really no fallout beyond your reputation.
Yep. Yeah.
And with that comes a lot of, like, very scary things that can happen to you, like, even if you're doing nothing wrong, people can make you look
Mm.
really bad.
Well, and you're so right about the fact that it's unregulated. So I think there's online businesses and that people have some misconceptions about. Then there's coaching. And I'm not going to lie to you, I have problems with the coaching industry because I see so I've like I wouldn't say I've collected coaching accreditations, but I take it very seriously. Like I take my role when I'm coaching a client that I don't know that there's a nobler profession in that moment where you're helping someone get to where they want to go. There's something really sacred about that. And I
Yeah.
see a lot of people who I'm just going to be honest. I see a lot of people who've had like one successful business year and then they're like, "Oh, I want to be a coach now. I want to mentor. Like
Mhm.
I want to like they think it's like an easy ticket to money." What they're doing is not coaching. They're making promises in their marketing that they can't back up.
Mhm.
And it's really messing with the industry. So there's a lot of mistrust out there. And when you're operating in a digital space, you're not human to a lot of people. It is so, and we were just talking about this before you hit record. It is so easy to throw hate at somebody that you see online because they're not always like conceptually real to you.
Right.
So it is a space that will have more conflict. I would say more conflict than person to person because it's just easier for people to separate you. People will tell themselves stories about who you are, what your intentions are, and the impact it's going to have on them. And it's really hard to get ahead of that. It's easy when you're in person and when you're seeing them every single day because they can humanize you, but that's not going to happen in the digital space. So, and this is also my plug. If you are a coach, please don't misrepresent yourself in your marketing. Please be ethical because it is a good profession and it's one that can make so like the thing that made the biggest difference for me was when my therapist started using coaching on me and I was like, "Whoa, like this is incredible." It can really help people, but please be ethical. And frankly, if people come to me and they haven't been ethical, if they've come to me and somebody has outed them for like misrepresenting themselves in marketing, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for that, to be honest, and I'm not necessarily gonna put my name on that because my name also means something, and I wanna be on the side of people who are doing good in this world, and that's one of my key things, and we'll talk about this. There's this concept called the red velvet rope policy, which once you have it, will decrease the amount of conflict. Who do I wanna work with? And people who I wanna work with are people who are ethical and are doing the right thing and are willing to own their mistakes and make it right when they fuck up, because you will fuck up.
Yeah,
That's you're human beings, right?
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. So I guess maybe we should work backwards. Let's go from like the most common crap that people are going to have happen to them to like least common and maybe scarier.
Yeah, sure.
And
So
just yeah.
yeah, so okay, I have been in business now for 4 years. So
Mhm.
that is like I've been doing this work now specifically for 4 years. So that is my lens and I want to just say that outright so that people understand where I'm coming from. What I have seen with helping entrepreneurs, the biggest thing is people ghosting and people not paying their bills. I
Yeah.
think that is probably the most okay, you agree. That's good cuz you're in more businesses than I am. That's the most
Mhm.
common thing for me. So, one of the things I think to realize is that if you are doing cross border business,
Yep.
it can be really hard to enforce payment when someone has decided they don't want to pay you. And
Yeah.
sometimes the cost in energy to chase that, the cost in having like a bill collector go and chase somebody, the cost of bringing litigation against somebody will far outweigh the benefit you will get from chasing that one client. That's not what people want to hear. I'm very pragmatic. Time is money. If you were to come to me to say there's one person that isn't paying my bill, what I would be looking at is okay, we can maybe do an email sequence to see if we can get them to pay and see if we can appeal to their common decency. But what I'm really looking at is how do we prevent this from happening again? So the best thing you can do is to have language in your contract that will let people know what will happen in the event that they don't pay their bill. And you can report them to credit agencies. There are things that you can do that don't necessarily require chasing them. They're not going to give you that feeling of justice, but it will let people know what your options are. And then once those are there, once you set those expectations, then, and you and I have designed something like this for your business, we have an email sequence that is not threatening. It's actually using human psychology, like what you talk about with, I think you said it in your email today, neuromarketing. You're still marketing yourself in that relationship. So we're using some of those principles to encourage people to pay the bill. The other thing that we're doing, and I think this is so important, especially in this day and age, is we don't know what's going on with the other people. And one thing I really like about working with you, Kenda, is you are compassionate. If somebody is running into financial difficulty, you're never going to say, pay me instead of putting food on your table. You want to work with the person. So some of this too is also about managing shame and managing their experience because I'm sure a lot of us have been I certainly have been in situations where I couldn't pay my bills. I had to pick what bill I needed to pay for. Like there were times when things weren't always that great. And the shame that comes up with that can prevent you from having the conversation to work with people. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to say like, "Hey, what's up? How can we enhance the relationship? How can we make the person think, wow, they really care. They really, especially with you where you're helping entrepreneurs, she really gets what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And she was supportive to me, even when other people wouldn't have been supportive. That's going to give you social capital. That's going to protect your reputation. That's going to protect your business. So, my approach is not for everybody because my approach is very humanistic. My approach is like, how can we make the world a better place? How
Yeah.
can we all be kind to each other? And how can we actually increase the chances that you're going to get paid? Because if you send a bitchy email to somebody, do you think they're going to want to pay you? No, they're going to find a reason not to pay you. Why
Mhm.
would we give them ammo to villainize you? No,
Oh,
the best thing to do, and this is by far the most effective thing I've seen, is to be kind and to remind people that there was one coach, I saw that she had this and I was so impressed with it. And it happened because I was working with her and I had a rough time in my business. And there was one month when I couldn't make the payment and I got her like auto payment thing. it was so kind, and it totally just reinforced my strategy where she was like, I want you to know you matter. We care about you. We want you in this community and we're willing to work with you. And we just want to thank you for being you and being here and give us a call. Like, let's figure something out. I was picking up the phone so fast to fix it. It
Yeah.
was highly, highly, highly effective. And that's the difference between what I do as strategic counsel and what a normal lawyer would do. Because a normal lawyer would be like, go fuck yourself, demand letter, here we go.
Demand letter immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and you can tell me if you agree with this. I feel like most people or like entrepreneurs that are on the side of like they weren't paid, they immediately jump to this person hates me, they're trying to skip out on payment, they're doing this to me
Yeah.
intentionally, and it's like it's almost never personal.
You are so right. And oh my gosh, I love that you're saying this because I actually saw an article today. I can't remember where I flagged it, but it was written by a lawyer and it was like most lawyers don't think about the psychology behind why people make decisions. And I think that's what separates people like the author of that article. And at the risk of tooting my own horn, which more women need to do, by the way, so I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah,
That's
toot
what
your horn.
separates me. Yeah. It's like all so in those moments, you're telling yourself a story. But all
Right.
we really know is that your bill didn't get paid. We don't know if it was because of a tech error. We don't know if it was because they had an emergency and they were hit with like $100,000 medical bill. We don't know if it was because they simply forgot. Like sometimes auto pay doesn't work. Auto pay is brilliant, by the way. If you can have things, if you can make it easy for people to do what you need them to do,
Yeah.
that's the way to go.
Mhm.
All you know, the only thing, and if you take nothing else from this podcast episode, I want you to be able to understand fact from fiction.
Yep.
Fact is what you would see on a video replay. All we would see on the video replay is your bill didn't get paid. The rest of it, if they hate me, they don't like it, they're just ripping off my content, all of that shit, which is normal to think and feel,
Mhm.
that's just story. And
Yeah.
our job, I don't know if you've been listening to the Let Them theory, but I have, and I
Yeah.
love it. And when she's like, your job is just to let yourself feel your emotions and notice them and let them flitter away because emotions, if you don't pour gas on them, will only last about 90 seconds. So
Yep.
notice the emotion, be like, yeah, this is really triggering for me. This is bringing up a lot of fears I have around my business. And all I know is that they haven't paid. And if you work with me, it's okay that I plug our work, right? Can I
Yes.
do that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But one of the things that you and I have done is we have developed a template for emails so that you can have an automated sequence that follows up with people. So you're not even having to think about it. But also, the automated sequence is not only on brand, but supportive and designed specifically to encourage people to take the action you want them to take, which is paying you.
Without
And it's
making
all about the relationships
yeah.
without making them feel bad. Exactly. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because most
Yeah.
people it seems to me that at 9 times out of 10, the credit card company messed up. They flagged it as fraud. They didn't process the payment. It's
Yeah.
almost never actually the client. It's just like an error.
Or even if it is a client, like you need to know your client base, right? Like,
Mhm.
and sometimes the client really, really wants to work with you, but they've got to move some things around. And especially if like if you're working with entrepreneurs who've just started their business,
Yeah.
you need to expect there are going to be issues with bill payments.
Yep.
And having something that's like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm flagging this for you. It's going to automatically run in a couple days. All is well. I'm just letting you know this is going on. Like you need to kind of understand what fears that person is going to have, because if you're a business coach for new entrepreneurs, for example, I'm going to really target business coaches today because I think that there are some, oh, if I'm going to get some heat for this. Some of them are predatory. Some of them are predatory. Some of them
Don't let
misrepresent
it
themselves.
go.
Some
Yep.
of them like and I have like dealt with people who have been like the prey.
Mhm.
If you're a business coach, you have to anticipate that there are going to be people who at times are going to be late paying you. And it's not because they don't want to pay you, it's because they are
They
trying to
can't.
implement. Yeah, they can't. And
Yeah.
that's an opportunity for you as a business coach. If you're positioning yourself as someone who's like, oh, work with me. And like the insinuation is that they're going to be rich after they work with you. Like, let's
Mhm.
just be honest, that's what your marketing message is. If they're not able to pay you, something's going on. Either your systems aren't working or they're not implementing properly, and that is a coaching opportunity. That is your opportunity to get on the phone and say, how can I help you make the money that you need to pay me and put food on your table? If you're
Well,
not doing that, then you shouldn't be a business coach.
I completely agree. Well, and this is gonna be an unpopular opinion, and hopefully people don't take advantage of this statement either, but It's really not going to ruin your life to reschedule somebody's payment for the following month. It's
Yeah.
not that big of a deal. And if it is that big of a deal, then you have much bigger cash flow issues. You should fire your CFO. Like, you should hire a new
Truth.
CFO. Like, if it's going to derail your business for you to be kind to somebody and reschedule somebody's payment, maybe you shouldn't be in business.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my
I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. So I think the biggest thing, if you want to prevent that from happening, relationships above everything. You need to have good relationships with people so it's not as easy for them to write you off. You
Yeah.
need to have the right language in your contract so that if you need to, you've already warned people about what will happen. I personally have never had to do that. And I have had people who have been late paying their bills. I'll also tell you that the people who've been late paying their bills, who I've never been anything other than gracious in those scenarios because this is part of my value set. They are some of my best clients. Like they are the clients that keep on coming back. Like anything new, they're there. Like they are because I've showed them kindness. There's capital there. And yeah, I totally agree. If you're in the position, like you need to be as the coach, you have what we call a fiduciary duty in law, which basically means that there's a bit of a power imbalance and you need to prioritize the other person's interest over yours. If you're the coach, you're in a fiduciary position, you cannot take advantage of that. And sometimes that does mean actually I need to move a few things around so that I can accommodate you,
Yeah.
especially if you're a business coach and if you've made those promises to people. Whether or not that's like a legal thing or not, I don't know. That might be my ethics, but that's the world I want to see.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. Here's the question I think a lot of people are gonna have. Is there ever a time, or like, is there a dollar amount, or like when would you be like, okay, yeah, take it to small claims court, send them to collections?
It has to be a strategic decision, which I know is an annoying answer.
Yeah.
I've seen it work in a couple of ways where sometimes we'll actually do a bit of a cost benefit analysis with people where I'll say, if we're going to go to small claims, this is the number of hours it's going to take for you to be with your lawyer. This is how much it's going to cost a lawyer to run it. I do recommend that you don't do that kind of thing yourself, even though a lot of these courts are meant to be the people's court. It's always easier if you can outsource it because the time, like it's just more efficient that way.
The time it's
Um,
gonna take you to figure out how to file the
Of
forms is
course.
is
Yeah.
almost
Then there's like the emotional labor of going along with it because what you're doing is
yeah.
you're signing up for a conflict that's going to last for a long time. It's going to be you're going to have to show up to court. Like it's not just simply a matter of like filing a claim and then, oh, you get paid. So sometimes there's a cost benefit analysis that needs to happen there. And there are some companies that they've just figured out SOPs. They're like, we don't go for anything less than this amount or this is the amount we go for. Now, there have been other companies who have found themselves targets for this kind of thing when it becomes a pattern, and they've become an easy target for things like litigation, whatever the litigation is, or like I saw this word once in a legal brief and I loved it. Tomfoolery. Like they've become a target for people pulling shenanigans and not paying.
Yeah.
That's when you might make a strategic decision that's like, actually, I am going to run this because I want to make a statement to the industry that
Yeah.
I am not going to tolerate this. And I've actually seen cases where people have had a lot of litigation coming their way and then they take a hard line approach on like maybe 5 cases and then the message gets out like, oh, just to be clear here, she will run the course, she will run you to court. And part of my work when I'm like advising people is I'll do my intel, like I'll look people up, I'll talk to people, I'll see if anyone knows them. And if I hear like, oh, by the way, yeah, she's very litigious or she will follow through, that will impact my strategy. That will mean that I need to take a harder line with those people because they're not afraid of litigation. Most people are scared of litigation. The trouble is when other people prey on that, like that's not ideal. So
Yeah.
there's no easy answer to that. It's about what's comfortable for you. It's about what your time is worth. It's about what your energy is worth. Most of the time, if you can reach a settlement or a resolution, that is going to be worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
But part of where I come in is I help you make those decisions for yourself.
When does it make more sense for somebody to kind of make a statement by, like, making an example of somebody than to just let it go? Like, what would you consider, like, a pattern of behavior where it's like, "Okay, strategically, this keeps happening to you, maybe you should make an example of this person."
I think when you have enough data to know that your other conflict resolution procedure is not working, I think when you start to feel like there's a few people that are starting to do this, especially if they've banded together, or if you find out that they're talking and they're like there's like a coordinated campaign, then that needs to be responded to differently than one-offs. When you legitimately have not done anything wrong, I should have led with that. That is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
The client I have in mind where that strategy worked, they had a pristine record. Like we could defend them for no wrongdoing until the cows came home, because they not only met the standard of care in law, they exceeded it. So if
Right.
you know, if you can stand by your record, if you're like, I have been the nicest person, I have, like, this has now been 6 months, there, I am the reasonable person. That's really important. I think as well, if it's something that's been highly publicized and there's a lot of people that know about it, and
Yeah.
you know that there's like a brand implication, that can be important. If someone's being quiet with you, like bearing in mind that anytime you go to court, there's always a chance it could become public. Now, a lot of people overestimate how important that is, because a lot of us are like, oh my God, as soon as we go to court, everybody's going to know. Not necessarily, depends on the
Totally.
news cycle. Like we can all think about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, where that didn't help anybody that they went to court. It,
Right.
like, no one's brand came out stronger for that. So taking a look at how many people know about this, and then also taking a look at what you've lost, because if it
Right.
is a substantial sum of money, then it is going to be worth your time potentially to go after it. If it's like, I always find it really difficult to suggest that people go to court for four-figure sums, for example, because I
Mhm.
know that for a lot of the time, it's the time and energy and emotional labor is going to be worth more than, like, they're never going to get that back. The
Yeah.
other thing is it's going to depend on your jurisdiction. I don't know how costs work in the States, but I can tell you in Canada, and actually this is getting a lot of press right now because of Prince Harry. So Prince Harry accepted a settlement from oh my gosh, I think it's like MGN News, but it's like Rupert Murdoch's
Yeah.
news stuff. He accepted a figure that they say is like in the high eight figures to settle. The reason why he did that, even though he wanted his day in court, he wanted to air the dirty laundry and have the papers be accountable for the really terrible things they did to him. Honestly, like what they did is awful. He wanted them to be held to account. Why he didn't do that is that, let's say they offered him 10 million. I don't know what they offered him. I haven't looked it up today, but I don't know if it's been publicized. If
Yeah.
he goes to court with a $10 million offer on the table and he only gets 9,900,099, then he hasn't beat that offer. He now needs to get a better result than $10 million when he goes to court in order for him to not be liable to pay the other person's legal fees.
Mm.
And that's a risk that, now I don't know how it works in the States. I'm Canadian. That's a risk that people need to understand here in Canada. There are ways to
Right.
mitigate it, but it's not always just a matter of like, oh, I'll go to court and see if I win. If you lose, then you could theoretically be on the hook for not only whatever you got to pay the other person from the award, but the legal fees. The other thing I'm going to say, and I can't comment on how this goes in the States, it's not just a matter of going to court and getting an order and having someone pay you. If they can't pay you, you have to go through all kinds of ways to get it enforced. It's not just like automatically like, oh, like I can go, like you have to go in Canada, you have to go to the sheriff, you have to get an order to enforce. Like there's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through. It's almost like a second stage of litigation. So
Yeah.
you need to be realistic about what you can expect. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I'll do the conflict strategy side of things. I'll manage the relationships. But one of the first things I'll suggest for people, if they're not in my jurisdiction, is I'm like, go get a legal opinion. Tell me what's likely to happen if you take it to court. That's one piece of the conflict strategy, but I need to know what that is. And sometimes I need to speak with a lawyer. There are times when I'm helping clients through challenges where I'm like, I'll find a lawyer for you. I'll speak to the lawyer
Let me get you
and
one.
yeah, and coordinate it. And that's been very effective. But there's a lot, it's a big decision. It's not just a matter of going through it. And the other thing I'll say, sorry, I know I've been really long winded.
No, you're good.
Don't threaten to take someone to court unless you're prepared to follow through with it.
Yeah.
If you make a threat, be prepared that someone might, and it's a bluff, be prepared that someone might call your bluff.
Yeah.
And
100%.
like that, and because, and if you get a demand letter, because
Mhm.
there are people who send demand letters and they're hoping that you're going to get rattled. They're hoping that you're going to be like, oh, I'm scared, and pay. If you get a demand letter, call a lawyer and have, if
Mhm.
they can't give you advice, have them refer you to someone who could give you advice to find out if the person actually has a case, because lots of people out there will just send a demand letter knowing it will scare you without there actually being any real teeth to it. There's a chance that there's nothing wrong with that. I've seen people, this is big in our space, copying each other, right?
Yep.
Like that's huge. And then you get a demand letter for that. There are some cases where copyright infringement is a problem and you need to handle it. There are other cases where you can't own, like if someone's using the same
Color
color, for
beige?
example. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that more than once where people are like, "Oh, you're using this color scheme and I'm using that color scheme." Well, that there might not be copyright to that color scheme if you're just like
Yeah.
using neutrals,
Yeah, you cannot own the
right?
color beige or the color
No.
black
No.
or any color, you don't own it,
Yeah.
and people are like, "Oh, well, they were using the same hex code as me." So?
It you have to like if you okay, bearing in mind too, I personally will not do business with someone who gets in fights with other businesses on a regular basis. If you are trigger happy with your fighting, I'm not interested in doing business with you, because if you can't keep your relationship sorted with others, how am I to believe that you're going to keep your relationship sorted with me?
Yep.
So you have to pick your fights very, very carefully. And people talk. People talk. Word will get out. So if you're the kind of person who bullies other people, or if you are, oh man, Kenny, you said you wanted me to bring the spice. If you are so insecure about your content that you're freaking out anytime anyone like so much as comes close to imitating it, that to me suggests you have a content problem. Because
Yeah.
the only thing people, first of all, a lot of this stuff is out there. We
Yep.
all call it different things. Some people will trademark frameworks. Don't fuck with someone's trademark. But like a lot of the stuff you see it's like the same in every book that's been written. It's just said slightly differently. So, and ChatGPT these days, a lot of this stuff is not going to be novel. Your biggest flex is going to be like, all right, imitation is the finest form of flattery. Go and innovate, get better. They can't take that from you.
That's my thing is, like, the amount of time that you would spend sending somebody a demand letter
Yeah.
over a 30-second TikTok video, it 1, it screams insecure.
Yeah.
2, so you don't have any other ideas.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
nothing else that you could create. Nothing else. No
Totally.
other form of IP, no other content ideas, no other talking points, no other ways that you could talk about that same exact thing.
Mhm.
So you've got nothing. You were a one-hit wonder, you had one idea.
Yeah. Or, one of the things I love is I think a scarcity mindset is not good for entrepreneurship.
100%.
Um one of I would say on paper, people might think of this person as being a competitor. And sure, we do very very similar work. This person, like, it's so funny because my stepdaughter was doing a project on my business and she's like, "Who are your competitors?" And my knee jerk reaction was, I don't have competitors. I have collaborators. I have people who are inspirations and I have people who are doing the same work that I do, but I don't view it as competition. I view it as like amazing. Let's help each other. Let's lift each other up. And some of those people have been some of the greatest sources of support, even with like little messages from time to time. And we truly are all in it together. And if they put something out that's brilliant, like remember what your mission is. If your mission is truly to help other people and then you're hoarding your clients, that also it does scream insecurity and it's just not a fun way to run your business. And
Yeah.
I've actually been given really amazing opportunities because I've taken that collaboration mindset. And I mean, law, it's not that uncommon to be opposed to somebody at trial and then have to deal with them the next day on a totally different case. Like that can happen. And the cases, this is also ironic, the cases where I've been the most afraid of my opponent are the cases where my opponent was a class act. That
Yeah.
scares the shit out of me because I'm like, if you are comfortable enough with your case and your position to be giving me restaurant recommendations for when I come in from out of town to litigate the case, I'm fucking terrified.
Yeah.
Like that's
100%.
scary. Yeah,
Because
it's a
when
flex.
somebody is so not threatened, it's just there's something very appealing about that and very aspirational.
It's
And
BDE,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Well, and it's wild. I'm glad that you brought up the content thing because how many people out there, and now this is more so my niche, so that's what I'm going to target.
Okay,
But
good.
how many people out there are like, "Oh, I'm a content expert. I'm a marketing expert. I can make you all this money. I can make you all this lead flow. Oh, but you only have one content idea and you're going to panic if somebody else posts something similar? You're not an expert then. You
Mhm.
don't actually have anything of value to share. And it blows me away too when people, we might have to cut this out. This might get too close to home, but there's so many people in the online space that work with the same designers, work with the
Mhm.
same photographers, work with the same branding experts. And then when other people who are clients of those same branding experts have, a similar brand to you because it's that person's style, then they're up in arms about it. Then there's a demand letter. For what? You worked with the same like you hired that person because it was their style. And now you're going to come after their other clients?
Mhm.
It The insecurity is through the roof.
It's insecurity. That's totally what it is. And it's also not a great business strategy. Litigation is not always a great business strategy. There are times when it makes business sense. But if you are relying on litigation and intimidation as your only business strategy, that would make me very concerned. Like
Yeah.
very, very concerned. And also like trends come and go. There are some people like I use Haute stock, which I've just discovered is from the area of Canada where I was born. So I'm more than happy to plug it. But they said something about like, these are the social media trends for 2025. And I immediately started seeing, like, I could tell who was on the email list because I started seeing like people using them.
Yep.
And you have to remember that, first off, I think that people love it when you are increasing your expertise. So, case in point in this, like last night, I was working with somebody, I'm his strategic counsel, and I'm listening to the Let Them theory right now. And I was like, oh my God, this was in the Let Them theory. And I'm so excited to share it with you. And I really, really want you to listen to it or read it. And I didn't know that he was going to say this at the end of the session, but he was like, I just want to let you know it's really cool that you keep on upping your expertise. It's cool that you'll quote other coaches that, whose work you're studying or whose work you'll plug. Like that's not a sign of not knowing your stuff. That's a sign of being like, hey, I'm recognizing greatness and I'm going to pump someone else up. And especially if you're a coach, especially if you're a business coach or you're a service provider, you don't what like that. It's just like people repel from insecurity, and you want to make sure that you are putting their success above your ego.
100%. And I think that comes through not only in their marketing but also in the client experience.
Yeah.
Because your clients can tell if you're insecure. Your clients, and you can tell me if you think this is right or wrong, but my hot take is like when I onboard into somebody's program, and instead of a welcome, here's the information, let's get you started, most of the discourse is actually like, if you copy this, this is what I'm going to do to you. This is all, copyright, this is trademark, this is that. Here's my disclaimer for this, here's my disclaimer for that, here's the rules. You are, in my opinion, you're kind of subconsciously setting the tone. And you actually warned me of this with some of my onboarding stuff that I had, because I was kind of bitter because some clients had done some crappy things. And so
Yeah.
my onboarding was like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And you were like, girly pop, you're setting the tone and like putting it in their head to do that crap to you. And it I think it came from a place of like, well, I'm going to protect myself.
Mhm.
And I hope that maybe what people take from this episode is that sometimes you don't actually need to protect or defend yourself. Sometimes you just need to move on with your life, because spending time on whatever somebody's trying to come at you with or whatever somebody's trying to do is going to take away not only from your time and happiness and quality of life, but it's going to cost you money, because
Yeah.
the amount of time that you're spent worrying about these random things that may or may not have anything to do with you. How many TikToks could you have made? How many sales calls could you have taken?
How many people could you have helped? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the name of the person who said this. It's going to come to me at like 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. But it's like a famous person. There are going to be people listening, going to be like, it's this person. But you don't have to, I don't have to attend every argument I'm invited to. And
Yes.
one thing, and I really wish I could remember who said that. It wasn't me. But one thing that I discovered when I was practicing was there would be times when people would come to me, they would tell me this story, and I'm very empathetic. I'm very loyal. Like I'm on your side. Like I'm right there with you. And sometimes I'm really mad at what happened. And I'm like, oh, like I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
But then, so I have this like idea of the other person in my head and I've villainized them and I've murdered my client. And then I call their lawyer and I'm like, hey, what's up? Like, tell me what's going on. What am I missing? Because I've learned that's important. I've learned to keep an open mind that maybe I don't have the full picture. Didn't
Yeah.
always do that. Now I do. And I get a totally different story. And
Yeah.
it's amazing to me what can happen if you're just like, hey, I just really want to understand your point of view. Um, it's like I said, I'm into the let them theory. Now, Mel Robbins calls this a frame of reference. How do you see the situation? What's going on here? Because most people don't wish you harm.
Right.
And I think you're so right about setting the tone. That being said, like my terms and conditions do have that language in them. I have worked with coaches who have that language and I've gone through and I'll be honest with you, sometimes I read it and I'm like, oh, this is not leaving the best taste in my mouth. But from a legal perspective, I understand why it's there.
Yeah.
And you are, I think it's like straddling setting the example of protecting your intellectual property, not wanting someone to screen record everything or share logins, and like you want to protect your work, while also showing people like, hey, you can do this and you can still be kind and we can still understand that there, like the number of times I've seen the same marketing framework that's been like, they're like, oh, I have a signature framework. And then I go
It's
to a
the same
webinar and I'm like,
thing.
it's the fucking same thing. It's probably been in a textbook since 1965. Like, it's not yours. You're calling
Yeah.
it your signature framework. I really struggle with a lot of that because sometimes I'll come up with something totally independent and then I'm like, this is already a thing. Someone's already written a book about this. I think there's like you've got to find a fine line between protecting your intellectual property, which ought to be protected, and
Yeah.
also not hoarding and not being seen as a bully and not being like ultimately you want people to want to do business with you.
Yeah. You want people to want to, and I'm not into the woo woo, but like there is a certain aspect of like people have to want to be around you. They
Yeah,
have to want to be in your space. And if you are projecting this energy, for lack of a better term,
it is
of
energy.
fear, essentially, because that's what that screams to me is like it's not, oh, we're setting boundaries and we're like being super protective. You can protect your IP, you can protect your business without giving language that comes off as, "Actually, I'm terrified of what you could do to me."
Mhm. So I am into the woo. I'm not gonna lie. Like I'm
I
into
know.
like the spiritual side of things. Like I'll talk about manifesting. I I I say this somewhat jokingly, but I honestly think like if you wanted to make the argument that I manifested my husband, you probably could. Like there are I really believe that like as you said, the energy you bring to a conversation is gonna shift everything. I'll give
Yep,
you an example. There was one time I was running a case and when I first got it, I was like I have a side. Like I can get things done if I need to. Like I'm not I realize that I come across well, hopefully I come across as kind. I feel like I'm spicy today. Like I'm in an extra spicy mood, but like I'm very kind and
yep.
there are times like when I shy away from conflict if I'm feeling scared. But if someone fucks with one of my clients, like boom, I'm ready to go.
Look
So I
out.
had like set this case up. I was like fucking going for it. I was like, this is so stupid. But then in the meantime of getting the case, working it up, and then getting to what you guys would call deposition, we call discovery, I had taken my coaching courses and I was like, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to like come at this with a different approach. I'm going to see what happens. So I get to the deposition and the first thing I notice is that rather than the lawyer I thought I was going to see, they bring in a bigger player. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if this is an intimidation tactic. And like, I respect it. If it is, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like, well played.
Plot
I'm
twist,
down.
point of
But I was
view.
like, okay, this is interesting. And when I first started, the guy was like stone faced and like very intimidating. By the time I was done, like it took a day to question. By the time I was done, I knew his story. I knew what his kids were up to. Like this lawyer and I had made friends. And then he was like, well, you're probably going to say this, this, and this about the case. And I kind of agree and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it was like all of a sudden this case looked like it could be resolved when it didn't look like it could be resolved, even though I was like, dude, this case is like not so good for your client. It
Yeah.
just didn't, it was totally different. And my client's better off because I'm going to put this to bed sooner. His
Yep.
client's better off because we're not like acrimonious and our egos aren't involved. And I still think really fondly about the guy. And I got some pretty, like, honestly, I mean, the girl was just telling me the truth. It wasn't like maybe she wouldn't have volunteered it otherwise, but she was so comfortable with me. She was very honest. And she was honest about like the stuff that worked better for me. And I then like I honestly don't think you can go wrong by being kind. Some of the most lethal letters, and I think part of the reasons why my strategies aren't always different from other lawyers. Like you might get this from other lawyers too. This isn't just me. My strategies are so effective because I am setting people up to do the right thing and feel really good about it and know that, like, you know what, I haven't lost. This is a fair way to go. This is honorable to me. This protects the relationship. This is like, this feels
Yeah.
good. This feels good to everybody. If you don't do that though, you're digging your hole.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why my strategies are so effective, is because they are rooted in kindness. And there is this element of like, if you don't take the offer, if you don't come to the table to talk to me or give me more information, because I'm always willing to hear more, like tell me if I'm missing something, fucking tell me.
Right.
You're going to look like the asshole, not me, not my client. I look
Yep.
awesome
You
compared to you.
always do. Well, you're always so nice. And I can I can speak to that because there's been so many times where I'm like, this is what I'm gonna send. And you're like, don't say that. Well, don't say that. And it's come up in like a lot of different ways. Like we dealt with a demand letter where
Mhm.
I was like, I'm gonna fight this, I'm gonna put everything into it. And you're like, maybe just don't respond.
But we did have to. So this is where the model, right? Because like I can't give you legal advice because I'm based in Canada. You're in the U.S. So
Your
you did.
your tagline should be, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer.
It's like, I'm a lawyer who will help you with life things, and like I help you like do the flexes in life that you didn't know are possible. We
Mhm.
did get a legal opinion for you.
We did.
And that was important because we needed to make sure that whatever response we came up with, you felt confident with. That's
Mhm.
key. But yeah, we did dial it back. We figured out that your legal position was totally sound. And then we could make a decision. Do we need to respond to this or not? If you get a demand letter and you've done something wrong, this does happen from time to time. You get a demand letter and you're like, oh my God, I kept billing you and I didn't realize that I was supposed to stop billing you. Like, I'm so sorry. I kept on collecting money. And then the person, for whatever reason, maybe they panicked, like, I don't know, but you get this like letter. And this day and age, by the way, ChatGPT can be responsible for people's letters. So, like, it might not even be them. They might have put it into AI. Then they get this bitchy letter and they're like, oh, I'll send it because they're so anxious. Like, we don't really know, right? If
Right.
you have done something wrong, own it. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, there are ways that you can contain it, but if you've done something wrong and somebody's like, hey, you know what? I deserve to be compensated for this and I think the law would agree, I'm not suggesting that you just ignore it. I think
Right.
doing the right thing is like top of the list. So if you have fucked something up, if you haven't delivered on something you were supposed to deliver on, if like if you've done something that's offside, take accountability, make amends. It is so much easier to negotiate a favorable outcome at that stage than it is if you're like, go fuck yourself, and then the other person has to go to the effort of like getting a lawyer and going to court and all that stuff. Like, the demand letter is an invitation to have a conversation. That's how you got to look at it. And sometimes you don't
It's
need to
not
RSVP.
a lawsuit. A demand
Not
letter is not
necessarily.
a lawsuit. You are
No.
not necessarily being sued because anyone can send a demand letter. They don't have to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I could
It's more
I could
effective if it comes from a lawyer. Like, one of the things I'll do is I'll like pick, like, if I want a demand letter sent for one of my clients, I'm not going to send it myself because I operate in the shadows. I like to ghostwrite things. I like to like let the client stand up for themselves. But if
Yep.
I think a demand letter needs to be sent, you bet your ass I'm picking a law firm that's scary to send the
Yep.
demand letter. However, if the demand letter comes with a complaint, or in Canada, we call it a statement of claim, that's
Mhm.
different. That's somebody who's ready to rock and roll. But if it's just like, hey, I'm sending a demand letter, I want to talk about this, it's just a demand letter. And your next move is to get some advice about whether there's a problem, and whether, if you're one of my clients, you can come to me and be like, hey, here's a demand letter. I'll ask for a lot of information about what happened. then I'll make a recommendation of, okay, I'll maybe go find a lawyer in your state, and I'll be like, go, like, there are these 3 people. Let's talk to them, see if we like them. Let's get an opinion. Or if it's totally a PFO, please fuck off scenario, then we can decide whether we're going to write a PFO letter or whether we're going to respond at all. Sometimes even a letter clarifying, like, hey, this is what's happened. You may not be aware of this, but this is what's like, because it's anxiety, it's fear. Like, this
Mhm.
is not my saying. I heard this once from a wonderful person. If you guys want to know who I heard this from, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to drop his name here because I don't have his permission. He said, anger is fear's bodyguard. It's
Mm,
all fear. People are just afraid. And
100%.
all we know is that they've sent you a letter. We don't know why. We don't know if they're like, I was just watching Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and like I'm rewatching, I'm like, oh, gee, there was one instance where like a husband sent a threatening note. The wife didn't even fucking know about it at the time. Or if she did, she was under duress. And like you don't know what's going on. So don't jump to conclusions.
And
Chill.
yeah, that's honestly the most powerful piece of advice, and, like, that alone has, like, changed the way I operate in business because you know me, I'm like, "Here's a conclusion, I'm jumping off the conclusion cliff head first." Like,
It makes you a really fun client though, because you're never boring.
never boring. I'm
Yeah.
like, "Susanna, we're gonna destroy these people," and you're like, "Hang on. Wait,
We might have to destroy them, but not yet.
let's get some more information."
Let's get some soft power in action.
Exactly, exactly. And that's the thing is, like, I wish somebody had told me that before I, like, started my business, because the first client complaint, you're like, "That's it, pack it up, close the doors, we're over." And it's like, well, maybe you did something wrong, maybe you didn't. And even if you did, it's not a non-rectifiable situation. It's not life or death.
Do you
And
know Donald Miller? Sorry to cut you off.
no,
Donald
you're fine.
Miller says something. I'm pretty sure this was Donald Miller. If it wasn't him and it's you, I'm really sorry for not giving you the cred here. But he gave me this idea about, okay, you fucked up. The next question is, how can I be extraordinary in this circumstance? And I take it further and I'm like, how can I make that person feel like I really care about them and I want to make it better? And let me give you an example of this. I was taught this by the same person who used the anger is fear's bodyguard thing. He modeled this for me. One day he called me and he was like, I need to reschedule an appointment. It's very short notice. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. As a gesture of my thanks and appreciation, I want to give you an extra session for free. Wasn't necessary. I felt so taken care of. And then like last year, I had some bad luck. I got that like stomach virus that's still
Yeah.
going around. I'm like a germaphobe right now because that stomach virus fucking sucked.
Oh,
But I had to cancel like 5 appointments in one day. And every single appointment, I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm going to give you an extra appointment. You can use it anytime in the next year. And I please know I really care about you. Two things are working to my advantage there. The first one was that I had a really good relationship with these clients. My clients have, I can say this because I was just told this last night. Like, they know I give a shit. I care
yep,
so much about them. And so they know that that's there. Also, the fact that I was like, you've got an extra session, I'm already over delivering in a way that feels honorable to me. Every single one of them wrote back and they were like, don't worry, just get better and we'll see you soon. So you fuck ups happen. Everybody fucks up. What you will be judged by is your response to the fuck up. So
yep.
if you can err on the side of how can I over deliver? How can I make it clear that I care about this person and I want to help them and I want to like just hit this out of the park? That's going to do more for your reputation than any damage a fuck up will do. So, I mean, I think of people like, I want to say LL Bean, but I don't even know where. Like if you get a product and like okay, my husband for example just got a pair of shoes, and within like a week the shoe broke, and that's like not appropriate. It's a shoe. I won't say it, but like the brand is really reputable. So he writes to the brand. Back in the day, what I would have expected is the brand to be like, you have a receipt. I don't even need to see anything. No problem. I'm sending you a new pair of shoes. That's what
Mhm.
I would expect in that scenario. This brand was like, well, what color was the shoe? And can you send us a picture? Okay, we'll send you the exact shoe, one shoe, which was not helpful because the other shoe promptly fucked up. And then they're like, well, we only replace the shoe with the exact kind and we don't make that anymore. So you're out of luck. Do you want like a different color? And my husband is like, no, I want the specific, like, I don't want, like, it was like the choice between black or bright red. And I
Oh,
was like, that is a big fucking difference. Like, it's not
yeah.
like midnight blue versus navy blue. That's not a company that is behaving well in the face of a fuck up.
No.
Whereas if you'd been like, no problem, I'm going to comp you this, I'm going to like that, to me, I'd be like, I'd keep shopping at that company anytime because they care about the relationship.
Yeah. Well, and arguably some of your best client relationships come out of you messing things up and you fixing it.
Yeah.
If you were perfect the whole time, they probably wouldn't like you as much as if
No, you're
if
totally
you
right.
recover with flair, you know?
Oh, I love that. That's a good tagline. Recover with flair. Yeah.
It's like if well, and I read a book. It was talking about the Ritz-Carlton, and the employees at any given time, they can comp or give up to $2,000 worth of stuff to make things right with a customer.
Mm. I love that. Actually, the book, The Success Principles, I'm like rereading it, but I remember I read it for the first time like 10 years ago. And he talks about the four seasons being like that too,
Yep.
where it's like, we are not going to second guess you. I worked, one of the best bosses that I worked for, it was probably like, it was like early in my practice. They were like, we will never second guess you. If you want to do something that's right for the client, if you want to write off part of your bill, like that, it is so important. And those relationships are so important because it's not just like there's different kinds of capital, right? It's not just the dollar value, it's the social capital. So, for example, because I've dealt with this now so many, I can't even count the number of times I've dealt with this. If someone's imitating you online and you're like, ooh, that's really, really close, you are
Mhm.
going to have so much more protection by reaching out to be like, hey, this is really uncomfortable. You might not have been aware, but I just posted the same thing like yesterday and now I saw this. Can we just chat and just see? Because I don't want to sour our relationship. Can we just talk about it? The number of times I've actually seen people be like, oh my God, that wasn't me. That was like my assistant, or that is such an unfortunate thing. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. You posted it first. I'll take it down. Like that is going to actually make it less likely that the person's going to copy you next time. And if they keep copying you, so I actually have this thing. I'm writing it. It's not ready yet. I'm writing this thing called the Difficult Person Survival Guide. It's going to be like a freebie that I'm going to give. And I have this thing. I also have a course which I need to like rethink, but I called it the How to Deal with Assholes course. And
I'm confused with the name. I think that's great.
okay, then maybe I'll make it available again for people because it's like really good. But what I did is I read a bunch of books about how to deal with assholes, and I was like, okay, let me compile this and curate what you need to know. One of the things you need to know is called the accountability test, which is assuming you bring it up in a way that's respectful and like smart. Tell the person like, hey, I'm bringing this to your attention, and invite them to take accountability. Like, hey, I just over to you, this is what I would love to have happen, but I'm open to talk about it. If the person behaves in the way that you would expect 90% of the population to behave, which is like, I'm so sorry, let me make it better, blah blah blah, they're probably not an asshole, they're probably not doing it on purpose. If the person acts like a total jerk and you're like, wow, I cannot even think of like the person I hate the most in the world wouldn't even stoop this low, you're dealing with an asshole. And that
Yep.
might be a scenario when you're like, actually, I am going to take this to court because this doesn't sit well with me. But
Yep.
so that's like, it's like if you invite someone to take accountability, and you have to be careful with how you do it, you have to set people up to want to help you and to be able to help you. Those are two really important components. And they're still not being accountable and they're just like, whatever, well then
Mhm.
maybe that's the time to have a bit of an iron fist and be like, well, okay, I am actually going to outsource this to a lawyer. This is going to be my one test case where I'm going to make an example out of you because you were kind of a dick.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes that has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I love the way that you come about it because we've talked about this before. Sometimes we'll get like an nasty email from a client, and I'm like, Susanna, what do I say? And you're like, well, you're obviously dealing with somebody who is XYZ type of personality. So this is how we're going to respond to that. And you take into consideration like how they are likely to respond based off of the cues that they are exhibiting. One, I know we're like coming up on time.
Oh no.
I have to ask you this question
Okay.
because everyone in the online space lives in fear of this happening to them. You wake up one morning, there's a Reddit thread about you,
Mhm.
somebody posted a TikTok talking shit. Let's assume that you did nothing wrong or you made a small mistake that could have been rectified offline. What do you do?
Okay. First thing I would do is I would take a look at the reach and who these people are actually talking to. I would take a look at the content. Well, first thing I do is regulate my emotions, to be honest. And frankly, if this is you, call me and I'll take a look at it for you. But you want to take a look at the reach. You want to take a look at how many people are actually likely to see this. Obviously, is it true? Is there something there that you need to own and you need to sort out? I believe strongly that there are times when you need to correct the record. There are times when your silence will look to other people like you're agreeing with it, or like the Reddit thread is true.
Mhm.
So, one of my rules of thumb is I will correct the record with the same number of people who have the reach. So, I'm going to give you an example of this. The other day, and we were talking about this before we hit record, I had a video that was stitched and I had used a hook. The hook was attention grabbing. The hook was, in fairness, it was a hook that was a little bit more blunt than I would normally be, but I was experimenting and I wanted to see what happened. And marketing's a different way of communicating than everything else. So I was like, I'll give it a try. The person was latching onto my hook and they were using the hook to make the argument that like shaming shouldn't exist in marketing and blah, blah, blah. I don't necessarily disagree. I would like my marketing to make people feel good. And to that end, I looked at that and I was like, I'm actually not going to let this just sit, because my video was actually like a message of hope of like, this is how you might be feeling. But just to be honest with you, you can get over this. Like I used to feel this way and it's something you can fix. And so I actually responded to the same audience, like, thank you so much for engaging. I really appreciate it. I agree with your point that marketing shouldn't be shameful. And also my video was trying to let people know that they're not, like, all is not lost. And I also think it's important that we don't misconstrue what other people are putting out there. Essentially, I posted a response that I hoped would reach the same audience. And that's the key, is something you have to make a choice about whether it's worth responding to. And then you need to respond in a way that's measured, that's kind, that's not over explaining, but that shuts it down. And that's also kind of friendly, because you don't want to make the other person's back go up, because people will respond in funky ways when they're under threat.
Mhm.
So it's usually worth the time. And the thing about my strategies, and I think this is helpful, is like, I can teach you how to deal with one scenario. You can take that teaching and you can apply it to everything else. And that's one of the things that makes me feel really good. Like when you come to me and you're like, Susanna, we had this situation and we handled it. I'm delighted, because I'm like, oh, that's great. You're empowered. And that, by the way, everybody, is the point of being a coach, is to empower people.
All the way back to that. I feel
Yeah.
like okay, I feel like we need to do another episode just
Oh, I
about,
would
like,
love it.
the fit in the coaching industry.
Oh
Can
my
we
God, please.
please? Okay.
Yes. I would so love it. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Of course. This was amazing. You're amazing. Where
So are
can the
you.
people find you?
You can find me at susannahmargison.com. And I would say, if you're like not sure if I can help you, just book a free call. I never am mad about getting a chance to talk to someone about their life for 30 minutes. So just book a free call with me and come into my world, and you will have a cheerleader for life from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Absolutely. You're the best. Thank
So
you
are
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Kenda.